So for the listening or responding assessment lesson, I had my students listen to Enchantment by Brian Balmages, which is a beginning band piece. We listened to it once, and then we talked about what the title might be. So I didn't tell them the title to begin with, and I asked them after listening to this, like what images did it draw into your mind, and what do you think a title would be for it? And then we listened to it another time with the title in mind, and we drew pictures. I provided like colored pencils and crayons so they could draw any colors or shapes that the song made them think of. And then we talked about it. So my peers, concerning the assessment and the peer evaluation, the assessment might help inform them as students how to play the piece with meaning when we start working on it, and what to keep in mind. So they all drew pictures. They were all different. So like Annie drew a picture of a bear. Like she might be thinking of bears when she plays her instrument. That might help her. Like everything means something. It means something different to each student. But I would like them to play it with their meaning behind it. The students did meet my expectations in the lesson. It was interesting to me because they all drew pictures of like an item or like an animal during when we were drawing pictures, which was interesting because I personally would have just drawn like a bunch of colors, like a bunch of dark colors, and not necessarily like an actual picture. Which is very interesting. I remember like I did this when I was in beginning band or beginner music class, and I drew just kind of shapes and colors that the song made me think of instead of just like an actual picture. So that was very interesting to me. They definitely understood what I was teaching, and I really liked that. Like Annie definitely heard a bear, and even though we talked about it and the song wasn't about bears, she still thought of a bear and she still drew one when we listened to it again. The next lesson following this, we would start to play the piece. I would ask them to keep in mind what they were thinking about when we listened to it. So meaning and intent is just a really important thing to me as a musician, and I think students should play songs with meaning, even if they're thinking of magic during this song or thinking of bears during this song. I want them to be playing it with whatever meaning they found in it. They definitely excelled in talking about what this song meant to them, and I think if I were to change my lesson a little bit to challenge them a little bit more, I would have them draw a picture like when we first listened to it, before we started talking about what the song meant to us and what the title of the song was. And then have them draw a picture later and then compare the two. So instead of drawing just one picture at the end after we talked about what the title was, and we already know that it's called Enchantment, it's very magical, they could draw just whatever it made them think of. So it didn't necessarily, they didn't have any predispositions about the piece, and I think that would be very interesting to look at. And then this, let's see. Oh, I definitely think this was important because, again, putting meaning to the piece, and I think active listening to listen to the piece before we start working on it, so they know what they're kind of striving towards. And the video we watched was actually of a beginning band playing it instead of like a professional band, so they were able to hear what they could achieve, could easily achieve. Listening regularly and instruction, I think, is really important because it helps refine their ears. It helps them to find music in their meaning in their music, and it helps them to just know kind of what they're up against and what they can achieve. Any weaknesses or potential drawbacks, at least with my lesson, I was a little bit afraid if I were to do this with actual beginning band students that they might not feel comfortable with drawing pictures. They might feel embarrassed, or like they might not want to share. Luckily, all my students did feel comfortable with sharing, and I definitely opened it up to you can share if you'd like to, but if not, you don't have to, because I wanted them to draw very freely instead of just drawing what they think they should have drawn, or just drawing something that like they thought was good. So that is definitely a potential weakness. And then with just listening in general, someone could argue that maybe it takes up too much time, and instead of working right on the piece, or taking too much time in a class period just by listening to them. However, I would disagree, because I think it's super important, and I think if you listen to a piece first, it can get you a lot further when you start playing it. I would listen to the piece constantly. I would sing through the piece with my students. I would maybe have brass players buzz the piece. I think is really important, especially in sectionals. I think that would really help them achieve the piece, playing the piece to its top potential a lot faster. So I would argue against it taking too much time.